Councillor Kelly.
Yes, I think, Mr Chairman, we perhaps need to give our staff some help in relation to why we want to add the second part of the resolution, if in fact councillors do. The point being, it's in for a dig, isn't it? That the Ministry for the Environment set the RMA up to have layer after layer of consultation before we can produce district plans, some of which take years as a consequence of that exercise. Everything has the opportunity to be appealed that goes to resource consent application hearings. I think there are 3 levels of appeal, if I've got that right, if not 2 for most. And Mr Chairman, I think that we should just be saying to the Ministry for the Environment in the nicest way and most constructive way possible, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander in relation to giving us a chance to help central government get it right. Because if I could just finish, there's one thing that always scares me witless about legislation that is across the country, is that whoever is putting it together hasn't a clue about how the other half lives in the other half of the country. And it's often a very urban-based policy that comes out, which has no relevance and which causes problems, costs, irritation, and undermines little district council plans like that of Taupo District.
All right, just to give you some guidance with regards to the wilding trees, something like this might be appropriate. Wilding trees, while Taupo District Council is concerned about the management of such trees, should lie with regional councils under their pest management obligations.
Yep.
And then you might want to, with regards to the setback from the streams, explain as well.
Yeah.
Councillor Hagen?
I was just going to ask for a bit of clarification with regards to the first part of that suggested resolution, that if it was to be that the amended attachment 1, then after 2010, with any necessary amendments identified by the council, should be deleted and is submitted. Is that what you wanted?
Probably, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Ufang.
You're most welcome.
Can we get that down, Madam Secretary?
So delete.
Taking ahead, so she does. Can you go again, please?
Yeah. That the amended attachment 1 to the report of 28 September 2010 is submitted to the Ministry of the Environment by 3rd of October 2010.
That's part 1 and then part 2.
Yeah, and then part 2.
With all due respect, as the mover, I think you need to leave in with any necessary amendments identified by the Council, because Councillor Ufhagen, you have just supported the amendment in relation to the Regional Council looking after wilding pines.
Councillor McKell, you are absolutely correct.
Let's just leave it as that the amended attachment 1, and the rest of the words are the same. Part 2 is what Councillor McKelvey said. She's going to move that. Do I have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Bernard, is there any further discussion? There being none, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you, guys. We're going to agenda item number 10, Ms McLeod.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Right, this is not necessarily an easy item to understand, so I'll basically just highlight the key points.
Before you do, Ms McLeod, in the first page you'll see a figure called 63,000 tonnes.
I was going to mention that.
I'm going to mention it before you do. It's kilos.
That's
the total tonnage is about 153. So that equates to 63 tonnes.
Kilos.
No. 63,000, it should be kilos, but 63,000 kilos equates to 63 tonnes.
Yes. I like to take more.
Oh, no, come on. Don't ask me, brother. Right,
63 tonnes.
Right. Going back to the item. For those councillors who've obviously been through this, the whole development of the Lake Taupo project, some of this will be not new information for you. But for those who haven't been through the process, I think it's important I just elaborate a couple of points here. First of all, when we first went into the Lake Taupo protection project, we had assumed that what we would be doing is actually buying land, and basically converting the land and then potentially on selling it. Now, a lot of things have happened since the project was originally set up. Land prices have changed, and the government has actually released its emission trading scheme. So the scene in which the trust is operating is a bit different from where it had been. And in fact, it's actually worked in our favour. What the trust, because of the changes in land prices, what the trust has been working on has been much more looking at buying nitrogen as opposed to buying land. And what's made that a favourable option is because of the emission trading scheme and the ability for a landowner to both be able to sell their nitrogen credits, and also sell their carbon interests, and then retire land, which is then held in perpetuity as not being allowed to emit any more nitrogen. So there's been a number of deals that have been done to enable that to happen. And what's the other issue for the trust in actually doing that, though, is that obviously they need to, there are some payments that need to be made for that. Now, because of the way that the trust has been funded, we give an annual amount over to the trust that we collect via our rate. The government gives a share, and Environment Waikato gives a share. There is a clause in the funding deed that goes with this project, which basically is what we call the out clause, and it's the reason for it being there, and Councillor Ormsby will remember that when we put the trust deed together, it's one of those issues that we actually argued very strongly with the government, because we felt that this clause would actually fetter the trust's ability to actually to basically borrow money, and the government were equally strong in terms of saying no, that clause has to stay in there, because we cannot basically commit future governments to funding. They have to have the ability to be able to change their policy. So that's the reason for actually having the out clause there. But from the trustees' point of view, they are vulnerable in terms of the contracts that they're actually entering into. So their concern is that they're entering into contracts, they're looking at payment over time, but one of the funders could potentially pull out given the nature of the funding deed that's attached to the project. We've been talking with government for some time about how we might address this problem, because here's a real opportunity, because there are a lot of people now who are actually stumping up and saying, look, we want you to purchase our nitrogen, we want to enter into these contracts, and we need to take advantage of this. And so we've been talking with government, and you'll recall that we actually had a visit from Minister Carter, and the local MP was also present at that meeting, where we talked about the difficulties that we were actually having because of the out clause. So the government has gone away and scratched their heads, and the Ministry for the Environment has put a proposal, or is putting a proposal to Cabinet, which is looking at the potential of making multi-year appropriations. And basically what that means is that they will look at bringing forward funding for 4 years, which enables the trust to obviously enter into the agreements. But they're also saying that if that's the case, and we're looking to our partners to also make sure that they are contributing their share of that as well. So what this paper is about looking at what should TDC do in relation to that funding. And we've put forward, essentially there's 3 options, but probably 2 that are realistic here. The first is that we could do a similar, or make a similar appropriation as the government. The difficulty with that is that we collect a rate directly for this particular project. If we were to actually bulk fund it, it would mean that we would need to borrow from somewhere. And borrowing will naturally attract interest rates, and those interest rates will either need to be taken out of, put onto the trust for them to actually fund, or it will mean that we will need to actually look at raising the amount of rate that we're actually collecting. The second option is simply to provide a guarantee. We aren't under the same strictures that the government is in terms of its legislation, where they can't bind future governments in terms of the Public Finance Act. So what the second option is suggesting is that we simply guarantee that if the trust enters into contracts at present, that we will honour our share of those contracts up to the amount of funding that we have allocated over the 15 years of the project. So we're not going any more than what we've allocated, and equally we're not going beyond our proportion of that share of that particular project. Now, should a future council decide that they no longer wish to participate in the lake protection project, then we would still need to honour the contracts that have been entered into and signed, but we wouldn't have any further obligations with respect to funding. So that's the second option. The third option was simply basically status quo and continuing. So those are the options, and the option that we're suggesting would be most suitable here is actually option 2.
Thank you, Ms. McLeod. And just to go on from that, because I'm on that committee, the Environment Waikato is also discussing this matter and going to make a decision prior to October the 9th. And as Ms. McLeod has rightly said, the Trust was of concern that they have no ability to raise extra fund to assist in speeding up the process of buying nitrogen so they could reach their target of 153 tonnes, which is about 20%. We are doing a review, someone will be doing a review next year to look at that. It might be in a few years' time that that amount of tonnage at 20% is not adequate enough, so that whole thing will have to be looked at. The ministers, we invited Minister Nick Smith, Carter and Te Huhu to come along, and we made it quite plain to them, all us politicians did. Prior to them getting here, the people representing the Ministry for the Environment had gone with this proposal originally to the Finance. Finance says we can't do that, we've got no surety, etc., as Ms McLeod has explained. I told them to go back and tell Treasury they sure as hell got more surety than we have, because they collect more money than we do. And that's the reality of it. You're either in this or you're not in this. And we made that quite plain to the ministers. Mr Smith was very receptive. He understands the situation. Wrote us a letter of comfort. As Mr McLeod has rightly said, he's putting a paper up to the Cabinet either this week or next week for that approval to be forthcoming. We did make the comment, and as rightly as Ms McLeod has said, the steer from the Joint Committee is of the opinion that option 2 is the way to go. The government has the ability to collect more money than us in a very quick and short time, and as Ms McLeod said, our ratepayers are paying this over a set period of time. So long as we give them guarantee, I'm pretty sure the government will be happy with that arrangement, that we support that, and we're in this for the long haul. And I would recommend to this council that that's what we do, at no further cost to our ratepayers, other than what's currently expected of them over that 15-year period. Councillor Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chairman. If you were happy to move that second one, I would be very happy to second it. Remembering that It's probably well over 10